Welcome to Thursday's edition of TimesCast. Campbell Robertson on the city's varying degrees of rebound 5 years after Hurricane Katrina.
While there's a long way to go, the comeback is actually fairly remarkable.
How the Muslim world sees the debate of a proposed Islamic center near Ground Zero.
We know that extremists have tried to use the debate as a recruiting tool.
And a preview of college football season.
One of the greatest times of the year, college football season, about to start.
Campbell, 5 years after Katrina, you're there in New Orleans. Tell us, you described three different cities, really, in some aspects. What's the city like 5 years later?
There's a lot of optimism in a lot of parts of the city. There's a new mayor. You can't dismiss the Saints. There's a lot of money coming in. There was an announcement yesterday about $2 billion for schools. So a lot of people are feeling good about that. But then you go to other parts of the city, and it's still got a long way to go. There are a lot of neighborhoods who feel that 5 years on, there's no hospital, there are not enough grocery stores, there are not enough stores at all, and they feel like that it could be just days afterwards in some places. It's a little bit simplistic, but there are sort of two cities. And then you have a whole nother one, which is about 100,000 people strong, which are the people who haven't come back. And we just don't know a whole lot about them.
What's the city become racially speaking? How has it changed in that regard?
I mean, it was 2/3 black before the storm. It could be close to 50-50. I mean, they're going off census modeling right now. But there's a lot of debate about that. It's still majority black, but just how much that majority is actually a big open question that we may find out at the end of the year when the census comes out.
To you, 5 years on, what's been, as a reporter who was there in other parts of the Gulf during Katrina, or right after Katrina, what's been the biggest surprise for you?
It was a pretty massive devastation, and I think people who have Katrina fatigue, who want to move on, don't realize that 80% of this city was underwater. And while there's a long way to go, the comeback is actually fairly remarkable.
Bill Keller and Greg Winter on the wide range of Muslim world responses to the debate over a proposed Islamic center near Ground Zero.
Well, Greg, we have a pretty interesting story today about how this story of the plan to build an Islamic center a few blocks from Ground Zero is playing not in this country but overseas, in Europe and in the Islamic world.
Well, we know that extremists have tried to use the debate as a recruiting tool, presenting it as proof of American intolerance and hatred toward Islam. It's also interesting that compared to the restrictions on Islam in European countries and some Muslim countries, there is less of a perception that this is a major controversy in many parts of the world. You have to remember that the Swiss completely banned the construction of minarets last year, even though the country had very few of them and they were not used for the call to prayer. Similarly, the French lower house of parliament last month voted almost unanimously to ban the wearing of facial veils. So in that light, the debate over where to place the mosque seems like less of a conflict.
Mm-hmm. We also have a story today about this American pastor who says that he intends to make a spectacle of burning Qurans. Any idea how that's likely to be portrayed?
Based on recent years, I'd say this is the kind of symbol that can really enrage the Muslim world. In 2005, we had the controversy over the Danish publication of the cartoons portraying the Prophet Muhammad. That caused a huge uproar around the world that still reverberates today. Similarly, there have been massive riots in Afghanistan over the perception and over reports that American soldiers and interrogators had desecrated a Quran. So a huge spectacle that could potentially be publicized around the world and broadcast around the world could have a potentially violent uproar.
Paul Meyerberg and Connor Ennis preview the top-ranked teams in college football.
One of the greatest times of the year, college football season, about to start.
We're about a week away. Yeah. We're all very excited.
Maybe nobody is more excited than Boise State and TCU.
They've been on the verge, pretty much.
And now all of a sudden this season they're set up that if things go their way, they could really make a run at a national title.
They're set up in the sense that they're starting at a better spot than they started in the past. In the past they started at 15, if that, maybe 20.
Yeah.
And now they're starting in the top 8, and there's an opportunity just before November for them to keep winning games, beat their marquee teams in marquee opposition and non-conference play, and they're 2 or 3, maybe 4, right when the BCS comes out, they could be right in the mix.
There are some traditional teams right up at the top of the poll.
As always.
As always.
Yeah.
One of them, Ohio State.
No surprise?
No surprise, but I mean, it seems last couple seasons they were not getting much love.
Well, if all things go according to schedule, they'll play Alabama in the national championship and get blown out by 30 points, right? Because that's what happens when Ohio State plays the SEC in a BCS bowl. But
a hate mail from Columbus, by the way, can be sent to Paul Meyerberg.
I think that Ohio State deserves to be here just because of the fact of how they ended last year, and that always helps. That's what people remember you most for, is how you play in your bowl game. And they went into a Rose Bowl where they were seemingly overmatched and they were underdog and they beat Oregon.
Where's Florida as we start the season?
People love them. I mean, they're top 5, but should they be is the question. You lose Tebow, but you also lose Charlie Strong, who he built those defenses. I think that's as big a loss as Tebow in my mind.
Alabama's in the SEC. And Alabama,
so that's going to be trouble.
It's hard to argue. Alabama, number 1 to end last year, number 1 to start this season.
Right.
Will they follow it the whole way through?
We'll find out. We'll be here.
We'll find out. We will be right here.
Tune in again tomorrow for another edition of TimesCast.